What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now, listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius, and boy, do we have a special guest. Oksana Esberard is in the house. What's up, Oksana?
Hi, Darius. So good to be back, actually, and see you again. All right.
So, repeat. What's funny is I don't know if I'm going to get started, and then we're going to go into a little bit of the how we know each other for the audience. But I'm going to do housekeeping. So, guys, listeners who are new to this, is it actually cool with you if I do some housekeeping and then we'll jump? Is that good?
Sure.
Awesome. So for listeners who are new to the show, The Greatness Machine, we're about two things. People are living their passions and those creating greatness in the world and doing so despite the odds. And Oksana is neither short of passion or greatness. So this is Oksana's official second time on the show. She was, believe it or not, the first guest ever on the show. And so since then, we're coming up on I think 400 episodes now. So it was 4 years ago, probably next month, I started the show. And so you were the first guest. So I think you were in Washington at that time. So this is you were outside. It was really pretty outside. But yeah, it was, wow, it's crazy. Welcome back to the show.
Amazing to be back and see that you're strong and growing.
Yeah, for sure. You too. So I don't know if I converted your episode to podcast because when you first did the show, it was a live stream show. And this is in the middle of COVID. And so I was doing live streams on Facebook. And then I ended up converting it into a long form podcast that following March. And a lot of the earlier episodes, the sound wasn't that great. So I don't know if your episode made it, but here we are doing the podcast again, and I'm so excited to get to spend time with you. Now, since I didn't convert the previous episode, I can't refer listeners to that, but I'm going to say this. I had this moment, so I'm going to give a little bit of our background. I met Oksana. Oksana is she has this important part in my life story in that we were at MIT, and we were sitting outside having lunch in this kind of round table discussion, and the listeners of the show know I talk about kind of the last, I don't know, was 2018 was it 2018 when you were at MIT? Is that correct? Yeah. So This is six years ago. And that was the first point in my life where I went on this, I guess I was 18. So there would have been a 4-year journey where Oksana said something to me. And then 4 years later was when I kind of hit rock bottom. and then I ascended. I went vertical. I had this a spiritual moment 4 years after that, but that started with this conversation. It started prior to the conversation, but Oksana said something to me that kind of stuck with me forever. So I don't know if you remember this. I brought it up on the last show, but I'm going to bring it up again. So do you want me, can I give the background? Do you mind?
Yes, absolutely. I just want to correct that I did not cause the downfall and the rock bottom.
No. It was like the pebble that rolled into causing a storm. So it was like the butterfly. You were the butterfly that flapped its wings, and then a tidal wave happened 4 years later. So we're sitting at the table, and I'm talking to you, and there's a few other people, and I said something I feel like something's missing in my life, and I just don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it. And you said, well, have you looked within? And I'm and I was kind of pissed because I was really working my ass off to try to figure it out, but I was missing the mark pretty hard. And I was like, well, of course I have. And I didn't know what you meant by it then, and I soon found out what you meant. And so it took me about 4 years to get to the point where I understood what that meant, to really understand what it meant. And anyway, I just wanted to thank you for that comment because it had a profound change on my life. Because I didn't really know what it meant to look within at that moment. I was very ego driven and kind of comparing myself against other people really hard and really envious of what others had. And it was coming from a place of living in the lack. I was lacking the facilities to understand like what I really wanted and needed. But anyway, I wanted to thank you for that again. It was very important.
Wonderful. Well, as long as you heard it and did something with it, then that's what matters.
Yeah, when we get into the show, I'll tell you more about what happened later, because it's so interesting just from where. But I want to do it from the context of the work you're doing. So I did meet Oksana at MIT, and we've gotten to spend a little bit of time together on the show. And I haven't talked to you, I guess, in 4 years now. So I think a lot has changed for you since then, and I'd love to hear some updates. But for listeners who are not familiar with your work, I'm going to give your formal bio, and then we'd love if we could give some of your origin story to the audience. Does that work for you?
Sure. Yes,
awesome. So Oksana is a well-being strategist, mindfulness and meditation coach, international speaker, and best-selling author. She wrote the book Next Level You that we'll be talking about a little bit on the show, and she's the founder of Sattva Me. You can go check that out at www.sattva.me. So Oksana, I'd love if you wouldn't mind giving our listeners a little bit of your origin story. How'd you get to where you got to?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start where you finished. Sattva Me is a well-being training organization for companies, leaders, entrepreneurs, and that's how we met with you. And the origin, I think it always starts from us, looking within, right? I'm going to tie it up to your story. So at about age 25, I seriously started to look within, because until that age, I looked everywhere around. I traveled to 30 plus countries, tried to kind of substitute miles for any form of pause and meditation, flew a lot, looked around the world, lived in 3 countries. I originally was born and raised in the Soviet Union, Russia, and I moved to the US when I was 21. And what led me to do that is, we always kind of rise from the crisis, right? So it was my personal burnout with corporate America, and then the death of my father, which was traumatic, an incident inside the house. And I realized that I can no longer run or look outside for answers. And of course, once I did that, the right teachers, the right people came. So I started to study transcendental meditation, Reiki healing, which is a Japanese modality. I don't work with it actively, but it helped me on my journey at that time. Did tons of private coaching for myself to understand and heal what's going on, to reframe my relationships internally. And I ended up in India and in the Indian Himalayas because I was so curious about the origins of where do we even started the phrase looking within, and what does it mean? And it led me deeper into meditative experiences, which I studied in India more deeply. I went there for 6 years, like for 2-3 months in a row. And then I realized that these whole tools, the holistic approach to life is really doesn't have the correct language to have implications in business, because the origins of my stress were coming a lot from the business world, but I was trying to cure them outside of the business world. So I said, well, what if we have tools that we don't create so much stress to first place, that we can have a healthier, more well-being oriented work environment, work relations, and attitude towards how we are productive. And that's where I started my journey. And I looked at myself as a translator between all these like holistic sort of hippie practices in India and bringing them to entrepreneurs and leaders that don't understand that language or don't want to go that far. And started to work with human psychology, nervous system, through breathing, through meditation, and through all other things that I was discovering in psychology and trauma-oriented healing techniques. And that's how I founded Sattva Me, and that's how we met with you as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so, for me, I used to be a person, I think prior to meeting you, when I first met you, I would have been someone that I had a saying. I said, there's 2 things in the world I hate. I hate meditation. I hate hiking, which is it's basically meditation while you're walking. And now I actually love both of them, which is so ironic that I moved in such a different direction. And the reason I think I didn't like both of them was I didn't like the quiet was a pretty scary place for me. Boredom was a place that I didn't like being alone with my thoughts. And so what are your thoughts around, I think a lot of people, especially, we live in a hustle society where people are busy, and this idea of stillness is difficult for folks because there's a lot of distraction. B, I think people like myself have never been trained in being alone with yourself, being still with yourself, giving your pause a moment to actually see what's going on upstairs. Like, what are your thoughts around like the culture we're in and how folks kind of can interrelate with that either in the business world or outside the business world?
I think from starting 7 years ago, I see a positive change. I think I see that more and more people are turning into these practices. Right now, I see more on an intellectual level, less on a practical level. So people are using like apps and like the Apple stuff to do the virtual reality meditations, which are better than not do anything at all. However, there's still a form of distraction because there's still someone is talking into your ear and you're still having some kind of guidance and things. Yet I find it's good that the people are sitting down and looking more into these things. We still have a lot of progress. And I also, what I see is that the environment also got much faster. Even from the time that we've talked with you, I think world just sped up. Like we were in COVID and things kind of slowed down to the degree that it was unusual for everybody. And it brought, I believe, a lot of positive change because people were actually able to relax, exhale, have a walk with kids and don't feel anxiety over it because there was nothing else to do. And now after COVID passed, it just went faster than it was before. And with that, I feel that now it became clear for everybody that it's our personal individual responsibility to create the heaven of stillness or to create the pause or to create the break. Because if you just follow the environment, you will be running nonstop, not sleeping, not having vacations, nothing. And I see that people just got tired of that and they started to take that personal responsibility. And that's a positive change. And that's something that leads to more positive changes in my view.
What do you think, like, in the business world, and again, to your point, things speeding up more. And when you start to have the perspective, I have the perspective, by the way, and I think it's important to say this because I think that I've done a lot of mentoring with entrepreneurs since we met, and a lot of the times I ask them, what is your, do you have a mindfulness practice? And they'll say, oh yeah, I work out. And I'm like, that's not a mindfulness practice. I'm like, in my opinion, a mindfulness practice is being quiet to see what's going on upstairs. And what I ended up doing was reframing. There's two things that kind of helped me. I went from literally being someone that said, there's two things in the world I hate doing. One is meditation. The other is hiking, right? Like I would say jokingly, but I meant it. And the reason for it was, funny enough, was I was like, oh, I'm bad at that. I'm bad at meditation, which is it's almost like it's an oxymoron to say it, right? And what got me comfortable with it was, to your point, I used apps. I used what was it? Sam Harris's app, Waking Up app. That was what got me started. And then since then, I'm now trained in. I got coached in transcendental meditation. But the reframe for me that was really helpful, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, was I was like, wow, I'm like watching TV, but the TV is my mind, and whatever's going on that TV screen, one of two things is happening. Either A, I'm distracting myself away from it, but it's still going on behind, it's kind of like the TV's turned on in the background. Or B, I'm paying attention to it and like trying to do something about it. Or not, or just knowing it's there, right? And so the minute I had this perspective of like, there's no such thing as being good or bad at meditation. It is just an opportunity to see what's happening in my mind. Then I was like, oh, wow, this is information, because I could see that, oh, I'm being obsessive about this one thing, or, oh, I'm really worried about something, or man, I really can't just like sit still and just like exist. And that means I am probably, that gave me input to then go and act on, say, okay, well, I need to relax more. I need to take care of myself more. Oh, I should really maybe go work on that one thing that's causing me some anxiety, or just not care about it because it's out of my control. But that really helped me reframe that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that perspective.
Well, one of the benefits of meditation or mindfulness practice, whatever you want to call it, is self-awareness. Self-awareness leads to self-mastery because we cannot change what we are not aware of. And that observation and the skill of observation, because most of us that don't practice anything like stillness, mindfulness, breath work, meditation, any formal practice that you want to take in. And you're right. I agree with you that exercise, it falls under the category of well-being practices, and they are very important. However, it's not directly working with the mind. And those that do exercise and also meditate know the difference. It's really, it can give similar feelings sometimes, but it's still very, very different practice. And the self-observation skill is important. What I wanted to add to your experience of watching TV, kind of like of your mind or having thoughts in the background, now what I also invite people into, which I also feel is important in our world, is to go in a different room from the TV, so to say. So if you think about the ocean, you will go with your thoughts being the waves on the top of it. And then the invitation is to go all the way on the bottom where you don't feel the wind, where you don't feel the movement, where you're almost like falling asleep, but you're staying awake. And that is a very important space because it allows you to disconnect from you as you know you. And it allows you to tap into different realities, modalities, creativity, the subconscious or unconscious that we usually don't understand. If you watch your own world, you are still conscious about who you are. If you go below that level, you can open a total different possibilities, the things that you cannot, that you forgot, that you didn't remember, the things that were happening in the childhood when you were too little to remember. And that creates a possibility to recreate, to redesign yourself, to redesign your thinking, to change your likes and dislikes and change the trajectory of your life ultimately.
I love that. So it's interesting you went there, and that was the next point I was going to bring up is I actually changed my perspective on this, and I view this as like almost the word I'm going to use, and I think it's a good word. At least I think it's a good word for business people because they get this word. I view this as just an old technology, right? It's like the world's like oldest technology. That's just probably one of the most powerful technologies, which is mastery of the mind through these different modalities that you're talking about. Because when you look at whether it's transcendental meditation or Reiki or these are very old practices, right? These are ancient practices that have withstood the test of time. And when you start thinking about that, you're like, wow, that's impressive that this is a practice from thousands of years ago that I couldn't tell you the name of one person that existed when that practice probably came to be, but with the exception of maybe like Buddha or someone like that. And here we are, a couple thousand years later, and this is a practice that there's many people still doing. So, do you consider these technologies, old technologies? Like, what are your thoughts on that language?
Whenever I hear personally, right, it's everything about personal association. I would choose the word potent technology because I feel like when we talk about old, it means it's no longer functioning somehow.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
But that's my personal association, right? So we tend to want, I think in our culture now, we tend to want everything new, the latest, cutting edge, AI, right? Like everything ultra modern, new. And so I would say potent because this technology existed, like you just said, for thousands of years and it still works and it will continue to work for human beings because from what I'm gathering and learning through my personal journey is that the science of self and the becoming better, redesigning yourself is something that human beings would always want to do and to be. And how do you get insight into your mind? How do you hijack your mind? The technology, in a sense of the technological sense, and scientists have not uncovered that. Yet, and every meditator knows, and every practitioner of mindfulness knows that you can get access to your own hardware and software through these practices. But science cannot figure it out. And every app and everything that's been created so far, it's still lesser than you doing your own practice and the benefits that it yields. Still a little bit, tiny bit behind. And that always going to be there, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's funny. Yeah. The word choice. I'm like, oh, I think old means like the fact that, yeah, I don't have a negative connotation towards old, but I think other people might, to your point. But very potent. Like I would argue in some ways the most potent, right? Because if you can control your mind, you control your life, right? And your life is all you have when it comes down to it. At least in the physical world today. And so, you know, I got introduced to transcendental meditation, and I saw that you are trained practitioner in this modality, and that this technology is the potent technology as we're using. And so I found, for me, I was a person that did a lot of guided meditation, and I still do a little bit of some guided meditation as well. But I actually do TM now. I try to do it twice a day. And for listeners who are not necessarily in the know on TM, I'd love if you can give some background on it, and as well, I'm going to give a data point. Some of the most famous and most successful entrepreneurs in the world were students of TM. Steve Jobs was a transcendental meditation practitioner. There's many others. Richard Branson, I believe, is as well. And so we look at someone like a Steve Jobs who's like would meditate for hours a day using TM. Would you mind kind of talking a little bit about that or your beliefs around TM? Because I'm a person that got introduced to it about 18 months ago. I have a mantra. I practice it every day, and it's actually going to your point about going deep. For me, I quit using the guided meditations as a distraction. I actually use my mantra sometimes when I'm just like some shit's going down. I'm like, all right, time to like just say my mantra to myself and like relaxed. You know, it's and it was funny when the teacher that taught me this, she said, oh, I have a relationship with my mantra. And it was like kind of like you telling me to look within. I'm like, what does that even mean? And now it's like, I have it. Like, oh, something bad's happening. I'm like, just like say your mantra and chill out, man. Like you're good. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on TM and, you know, how you've incorporated that into your work and how others might like think about that as when they go into their journey. Like, is this a version 2.0? Is this something that people could dive right into? What are your thoughts on leveraging TM as a practice?
So let's I guess start from my introduction to TM. So I kind of have a little background. This was my first and formal meditation practice as well. And for those that don't know, transcendental meditation uses mantra, which is a Sanskrit short word that, well, word is not, it's more of a sound, but we have to give it as a word so you can understand. But it's never written, it's pronounced. And so you learn it for yourself. And you repeat it anytime when you're meditating and your mind starts to bubble with thoughts, you repeat it and you do for minimum 20 minutes. You can do longer, but minimum 20 minutes twice a day. And that's the prescription that was given. I trained in transcendental meditation, and then 2-3 years into it, I would sometimes get up worse than I was before meditating. Like I would get up angry, aggravated, and really just unsettled. And I started to look into that. And I remember even that time my ex-husband said, like, well, you better not meditate because you're so mean after you do that. Why are you doing it? So I started to look into that. And that's where I ended up in India. So transcendental meditation, I got trained in Hong Kong. And at that time I went to India. And as funny as it is, transcendental meditation originated in the Indian Himalayas, exactly where I went. So there is a Maharishi ashram. The master Maharishi was one of the masters that Beatles went into. And the song Let It Be was actually inspired through that ashram. So now it's kind of a park / a ruin. There's nothing going on with it there. But you can go into that ashram. And I learned that Maharishi wanted to bring meditation as it is taught in the Himalayas to the Western world. But he also recognized that if he will give the full instruction, which includes breathwork, which includes asanas, which is the yoga pose, and which includes change in the diet, which includes change in the lifestyle, none of the Westerners will buy it. Like nobody would actually go. And he wanted it to, I believe that he wanted it to be something that a lot of people would go into. So he reduced and created a practice saying one mantra, 20 minutes a day and twice a day. That's your prescription, something palatable for business people, for Western people. And believe it or not, it went really well. People really kind of could do it. They felt that they could do it. And so Transcendental Meditation became a very powerful brand. Just like Deepak Chopra has a primordial sound meditation. It's the same concept, different brand, right? But the origin of them come from the Himalayas. So after that, I actually, when I studied in India, I learned the breathing techniques and I learned different modalities that help me to work with the nervous system before I go into meditation. And it really changed my trajectory of life because I calmed down my anxiety versus watching and magnifying it as I was meditating. Mm-hmm. Before, I had so much aggravation, anger, anxiety, frustrations, fears that when I was meditating, they were just blossoming and blooming and I had nothing to control them. Mantra for me was not enough. So when I started to do other things, like I said, breath work, movement, and modalities to really process my and channel my anger and fear, and then incorporating meditation as well, that's when I started to slowly becoming wiser and less aggravated and anxious. So I would say that if you are someone who is struggling with high level of emotions and high level of trauma, I would suggest to incorporate other modalities to help you deal with them on the level of the nervous system, literally help you calm down before or as you are incorporating some kind of meditation practice, which transcendental meditation or mantra-based meditation is wonderful. And I personally, what I got initiated into and what I'm master of meditation initiation is a Himalayan technique, which incorporates mantras from transcendental meditation. So the pool of mantras, they're not proprietary. They're wisdom of humanity. So you cannot just take and say, oh, these are our mantras and no one else can use them. So transcendental meditation use the pool of mantras, the same pool that we use in Himalayan techniques. So it's really a great resource.
Let me ask you a question, because this is something that's so the woman that taught me, it was actually my forum, my EO forum. We have a woman out of San Francisco that we use, Laura Osborne, and so she gave us each our mantra, and we're not allowed to repeat them to anyone. And is that like a whole thing? Like you can't tell anyone what your mantra is? Because I haven't told. She said we weren't allowed to, so I haven't told anyone my mantra. What like how do you pick the mantra, like for when you're teaching someone TM? Why are we not allowed to tell anybody what our mantra is?
Yeah, so the mantra, let me answer, I guess, the way you pick the mantra. As an instructor, you create relationships with a pool of mantras. You meditate on those mantras, and just like you created a relationship with yours, you can understand they have different flavor. They have different tonality, and they have different outcome. They can be some strong, like just an example, it could be something that's softening, or it could be something that gives strength. Just like different potency of medication or plants, they have different outcomes to what you want. And people come to the instructor at different stages of life. Sometimes they need more energy. Sometimes they need to come down and down regulate. Sometimes they want to be better in relationships. Sometimes they need to be better in structuring something, right? So you have the pool of mantras and you understand the tonalities of each mantra. And then you also build relationship with the person that you initiate to understand. Well, hopefully, I hope she did, but she was from your forum. So probably there was already a relationship. So she understands where you want to go with that. The reason why you don't share the mantras is because you don't really have it's almost to keep it sacred, right? Like you don't reveal your journals for a reason, or you don't reveal your conversations in prayer and put it on the display. It's a sacred, intimate ritual that you are cultivating within yourself. And with that, it becomes deeper relationship. It's like you don't discuss your sex relationship with everybody in the forum, just what you did and how you did it, right? So it's that type of secrecy that allows deep depth and intimacy. One thing that I would personally disagree with transcendental meditation is that the same mantra is used for life. Some teachers said, this is your mantra for the rest of your life. Well, in my modality that I learned in India, we actually get new mantras every 2-3 years. The reason why is because once you evolve, once you grow, once you practice, you are creating different vibrations, and the old mantra serves its purpose. It creates a groove, and then you're ready for the upgraded technology, the upgraded tool. Then you are cultivating something else. You're working on something else. Just like in business, you're constantly creating different directions and goals. So is the mantra. And I know that in transcendental meditation, when I meet people, they are like, oh, I've done the same mantra for 40 years. And they say it with a lot of pride. And for me, it's just like, well, kind of wearing the same shoes for 40 years. Like, you need to change them from time to time. That's the goal of the shoes. So I guess that's my disagreement. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, it was a great, and I was actually curious about that. Because it makes sense because it's a sound, and for listeners that don't know what we're talking about, you can look it up. But to your point, it's a Sanskrit. It's a sound. Like when they say it to you, you're like, what is that? And like it's not a like a language.
I can give an example. There's no secrecy. I can give an example of the mantra that became worldwide known is Om.
Yes,
OM.
right.
So that is mantra. It's actually a primordial sound, Om. But the way you pronounce it, every time going to be different. If I say it, I can say Aum, which comprises of A-U-M. I can say Om. I can say Om. So you start playing, and every time you're going to be saying it, you're going to be saying it differently. So the mantra is really an internal pronunciation that you don't put the voice into it. And every time you're saying it to another person, you're going to change it. You're going to change it and say it differently every single time.
Yeah, and so you're saying it internally, to your point. So I guess, and if we're on the understanding that this is like a powerful word that creates a vibration, that it totally makes sense that you would change it as you evolve. I hadn't thought about that. Going back to your comment though before around incorporating like kind of the full menu of the Maharishi's work into a practice, and I do think like probably people that are new to this stuff, it totally makes sense. If you want it to be palatable, you probably want to minimize it to the most digestible format, most potent format. And then my sense is that as people get comfortable with that format, you can start to add to it, right? And so let's kind of go into the breath work that you were talking about though, because that's obviously what like Wim Hof has gained lots of popularity, at least in the Western world or in the United States. Is this around like deregulate, like parasympathetic? I'm going to probably butcher this word. So was it parasympathetic down regulation? Like you're like basically like lowering your like the stress, getting into your like limbic system and relaxing, getting out of your prefrontal cortex, getting into your reptilian brain. Is that the idea there?
Yes, and you mentioned Wim Hof. Wim Hof breathing techniques also originated in India. He learned them from the Indian traditions, and he does not hide it. He learned them. He adopted it. The strength of Wim Hof is that he actually has, I believe, certain extraordinary capacity that allowed him to be the pioneer of these breathing techniques and withstand certain things. And then he learned the tools to be able to teach them to others. But yes, it's a sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system activation, default mode network. And you need to train that capacity. It is a skill because we have it naturally. Like we have stress response activated for most people in the business world almost all the time right now, to the degree that we actually don't know how to relax. And you started saying, I used to hate meditation and hiking because I hated that whole notion of being with myself. It's exactly telling me that your nervous system was so hijacked and so running on the high speed at all times that anything lesser than that viscerally felt uncomfortable. So for you, you needed to learn how to be okay with normal, non-activated nervous system. So right now, when you're meditating or hiking, you're no longer in stress. And that became familiar to you, but you needed to learn that because you learned the opposite. And that is true for many, many, many people. Because when they start to meditate, they're feeling uncomfortable, they're feeling unsettling, different. And like for me too, I felt angry after that because we start seeing and experiencing in a magnified level the nervous system being on hijack, being too fast.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I didn't obviously understand the science of what was going on internally. But what changed for me was, I told you I hit rock bottom a few years later. One of the things I realized in the process of starting meditative practices and mindfulness and just going in like internally, right, going inside to figure out like, hey, why do I feel this way? Was that I hadn't built up the muscle of awareness, right? And the way I kind of view everything we're talking about, going again back to this, like, hey, do you have a mindfulness practice? I always ask people this question when I'm talking to them. I'm kind of like observing their behavior, and I see that they're, to your point, in this like high stress, high reactionary mode. They don't appear to be happy. I see a lot of where I was, where they're at, and a lot of them are my friends or they're people that I'm mentoring. And I'll just ask them the question, and then when they say yes, I exercise. To my point earlier, I go, well, that's not the same. And the reason I say that is my perspective is this is a muscle you build, and the stronger the muscle, it creates the separation behind event and then reaction to event, right? And so that space is the muscle. So when I say that, I almost think of this, and I used to, I was an athlete growing up, and I still like to, exercise as much as my body can handle it. And I view it almost like a muscle group where, okay, I want to do my upper body, I want to do my lower body, I want to do my back, I want to do my arms, I want to do my legs, I want to do my mind. And it is a muscle that you build, and the stronger it gets, the more I can pay attention. I can to that what's happening, that thought, like the thought happens, and I'm like, okay, instead of reacting, I'm like, I'm not going to react. Or, wow, that's interesting, I'm having that thought. I even started doing a thing with my kids because I've had this recent awareness, which I think you'll appreciate, in that I come from a background where like my parents were very critical of our behavior and very reactive to us doing, if I dropped something, my dad would yell at me, right? Or my dad was actually pretty physical too. So there was a negative reaction to like spilling something or dropping something. And I did it to my son the other day. He like spilled something. He's 10 years old. And I yelled at him. And then I had this moment where I was like, whoa, like he didn't mean to. And my reaction was way outsized, and I was a total dick to him. And I said to him, hey man, I apologize to him, number one. And he's an amazing kid. I mean, like just like the sweetest kid, and like really cares. And it was obviously a mistake, like a accident, right? And I said, hey, I want you to like call me out when I react. And so I said, what's my nick? You can come up with a nickname for me. And I did it and so he called me Aggro Dad. That's my nickname when I'm an asshole. And so it's funny now though, because when I do it, he smiles and he calls me, okay, Aggro Dad. And I did it because I had this awareness that, hey, that moment between event and reaction, like I need to strengthen that, and I want him to feel safe to like give me like a nudge, like show me, hey, you just got triggered, man. But I do think that like that's something that I'm pretty happy with myself of even having that awareness. And I have a mentor here in I don't know if do you know Rand Stagen? Are you friends with him? Yeah, so Rand,
I'm not friends, I know of him.
Yeah, so Rand is a mentor of mine, and he's a friend, and he says, and he runs the Stagen Institute, and he has a saying which is, with awareness comes choice, right? And so I've kind of fallen in love with that statement, because for me it really gives me this power that, hey, it's my decision on how I react. And so a lot of like I find myself saying a lot of times to folks, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, they'll say, you made me feel this way, and so I always stop people when they say that. I go, I can't make you feel anything. Like that's you feel how I'm not in control of how you feel. I might be an asshole right now, but I can't make you feel bad from that, or I might be a jerk, or I might be rude to you, and I try to control those things, so I don't do them, as much as humanly possible, or as much as I'm capable of at this point in my life. But what are your thoughts on this idea of people making someone feel a certain way, or having an awareness around like how people make you feel and how you react to it? I mean, do you think that is like, is a lot of the stuff I'm saying in your mind coming from having built this muscle of awareness and like understanding that this is a thing that everyone can have as long as they invest the time and energy to building it? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yes, I side with you that when you start to build that muscle of awareness, you also start to know that no one can make you feel a certain way. It's someone can trigger something in you that makes you feel a certain way, but you can always choose to do otherwise. And that's in theory. That is something that you know to be true, and that you fail to practice.
Right.
Many things. So people tend to give away their power and their responsibility. And it's much easier to say, well, that person is making me feel this way, or that person is unkind, or bad person, or they're mean, or whatever, versus saying that there is a part of me that is being mean or triggered, or there is a part of my past that reminds me something that happened to me that person is showing me right now. And that's a totally different dialogue internally. And a lot of people, A, don't have awareness, B, don't have the time to do that type of game. And as a result, it's just faster and easier to play the blame game. If I said, sorry, he's an asshole down there, my job is done. I can move on for the day.
Right.
If I'm going to say, well, this person is doing something that triggers me and I'm not sure what it is, and I don't have time to deal with this right now, I'll come back to this later, that person is not important anymore. And you are doing really the inner work. I like to say that every person in front of us, and I like to live that way as well, is a mirror.
Yeah.
And if they're triggering something, it means they're giving the great gift of an opportunity to see something that you are not able to see within yourself yet. So if something is really upsetting you or making you happy about that person, then it's an opportunity. The same way, I also believe that there is collective consciousness, there is group behavior that is more powerful sometimes than our individual. And we all saw it in COVID. The collective fear of COVID went global. And even the people that at some point just were brushing it off, they were paying attention to it because it was just so grand. It was bigger than our individual things. So I think to a degree, a person cannot really make you feel a certain way. Larger groups of people can. I think that when you are part of an entrepreneurial group, there's a certain language, there's a certain culture, there's a certain way of behaving, a certain way of thinking, a certain way of presenting yourself, and a certain way of feeling. Hustle. You started with that. Entrepreneurship hustle, I think, and grind, I see it really in entrepreneurial circles. And it's a characteristic of business world. And if you belong to this business world, you're expected to behave and feel about it a certain way. You embrace it. This is honor. Versus in some instances and cultures, and even for myself, I think hustle sometimes is overdoing something that is not necessary. And, like if I say I don't want to hustle, this does not agree with my nervous system, it does not agree with my belief system, people think, oh, she's lazy.
Right.
She doesn't want to, right? So yes and no to your point. Definitely awareness is a choice. And if you can train that muscle, you will be more empowered to change your own reactions.
Yeah, it's interesting. The collective, the culture, as you said, I think has a lot of power. To your point, I would counter that to say like we have a choice of staying within that culture, right? If we want to like be in that culture, but if you're in the culture, I agree. Like if you're the odd person out, like you're kind of going against the grain. That's not a comfortable place to be, especially if you want to be. I mean, we as humans want to be, we want to be accepted in our groups from a social perspective, right? And so, and it's funny. I think that's a really good example. I don't know. Do you know John Vroman? Are you familiar with him or his work?
Say the name again.
John Vroman from Front Row Dads. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
So he's a group. There's about 300 members worldwide, and it's basically like businessmen who are like family men first, and they're heavily promote like time wealth. And he's like, look, like so it's like the opposite. It's like how much time do you have with your family is a like measure of wealth in their mind. And like how much time off do you take? Can you build a business that can make you money without working is like this massive like code of like of achievement, right? And so it's funny, like, because I'm friends with him in the group. I'm not in the group, but I'm around a bunch of members, and these guys are like, yeah, last year I took 18 weeks off. Like that's the first thing that they want. Like, it's not even like what's your revenue, your business. They don't even care about that. They're like, yeah, the more revenue with the less work, like the efficiency, like ratio of that is like the highest honor you can have in that group. To the point of like opposite of hustle, right? I'm right now. I've started a private equity company. I'm working really hard right now. But I've assigned a time frame around that where I'm like, yeah, this is fine for a year, 18 months because I'm launching something, but like there's no long-term scalability. I would refuse to do this long-term, right? So, but again, having an awareness around that. But I agree with you. I think that it's funny being kind of at a point now where I agree. I think there's a time and place for hustle, especially when you're starting something new. I think you kind of need an inertia to get something going, depending on what you're trying to build. But I do think it is pretty important for when we're building new stuff to get some momentum. But when I hear people like telling me that I work 7 days a week and I haven't taken a vacation in 4 years, I'm like, well, that sucks. Like, you shouldn't do that. Where in the past, I probably would have been the one saying it, So I think that there's a lot of power on that. Let me ask you a question. So you obviously, I know we're coming towards the end of the show here, and I could talk to you for hours because this stuff like really like this is one of my favorite topics. But you're working with a lot of entrepreneurs, you're working with a lot of business leaders. Like, tell us a little bit about how you're working with companies now. How are you working with entrepreneurs, business leaders with the work you're doing? And when you work with them, what are the results you're seeing on the other side of the work?
Well, thank you for asking that. Strangely, I thought that in the beginning, when I started to work, I was really finding the language and finding the format and finding the things that would work. And right after COVID, and I was missing something. I was flying so much. I was meeting people in person. It was really taxing on me, and it wasn't producing as much of a solid result. COVID brought a good gift of acceptance of doing online stuff. So now it became a merge. So within the companies, if it's a short online training, then everything is delivered online. We're having live conversation of short interactive sessions. We kind of skipped over a little bit, and I wanted to go back to that. We talked about breathwork, right? How do you prepare your nervous system to meditate? How do you prepare yourself to be able to train the muscle before, like a prep work before the training, so to say, the stretching? And I find breathwork is one of the most amazing tools to do that. Our nervous system, through the breath, is responding so well, even on a few minutes a day. And it's potent and it's very fast. And so in my work, I teach a lot of breathing techniques because people first need to learn how to feel. They need to feel the difference. Are they stressed or are they relaxed? They need to feel and know the techniques when they feel that the stress is going up, how to downregulate themselves, even in a moment of stress. And so we're building that toolbox of practices for them to be able to use. And because there are so many different people get responded to different things. So we have the minimum training right now is 8 weeks, where we go through different modalities. And then because it is usually with a company or with a leader one-on-one, we select the themes. Okay, what else do you want to work on, right? And then companies can work around difficult emotions. They can work on communication. Some choose actually meditation. They say, okay, tell us more about meditation. And then from there, after that official 8-week training, we see if there is a room to continue it. A lot of companies actually already, or people within the companies, the employees, the leaders and leadership teams, they see first improvements on personal level, that they feel calmer, they feel that they are more in charge of their reactions and responses, just like you gave us example. They feel that they're making positive improvements in other areas of their life. They start to prioritize their rest, their breaks, their family. And then there is group coherence that becomes available as well. They bond as a team. They've done something different that is not work related per se. They have a different level of a conversation. Now they have a deeper relationship on some theme, and that impacts their work relationship in return. So the results are always very positive, and even if not everybody is into these tools, I would say that there are always people that say, that's not for me. It's just people, I see them, they're not ready yet, because these techniques are probably one of the most tested time techniques that ever been invented. So if they're not ready for that yet, we respect that place. But even then, just a few people within an organization can change the trajectory and the culture of the organization. And especially good if it's a leader. If it's somebody on the leadership team that embraces it, then it trickles down to the rest of the organization as well.
What do you think? So for folks that want, like, maybe don't know if they're ready as an organization, I think obviously when it's like someone like myself, I'm like I'll give you an example. Before we start any of our team meetings, we do a recentering exercise. So you're talking to someone where it's a three deep breaths, right, as a group, right, to recenter like 15 people on the team. And a lot of my people were like, have never done that before. And I'm like, literally, we start every meeting that way. And so when you're in an organization like mine, where it's like, that's just part of the culture, right? That like they know that I do a lot of this stuff outside of the organization, but even it's one signal that it's important. How do you, like, for folks that want to start incorporating these things into the organization and want to work with someone like yourself, but don't know if they're ready, what would be an entry path for them to get started if they wanted to work with someone like yourself or introduce these mindfulness practices either into their life or into their organization?
The interest, I have free discovery calls. So anybody can book a discovery call and have a 20-minute conversation where we can understand together if it's a fit or not. I also think that people they don't relate it to the business outcome. I think everybody struggles with stress in our day in life. Everybody struggles with fast pace. And everybody struggles with emotions. And especially in the work environment and business environment, there's not enough opportunities to be able to work on that level. And therefore, if they want to consider training or bringing a person or introducing even a technique, it's worth having a conversation with someone. I would be happy to have a conversation with anybody who's interested. And then deciding for yourself, is it true, is it not, is it right, is it not? Usually from these conversations, the small techniques, like it doesn't even have to be 3 deep breaths. It could be a minute of silence. You just put a minute, you start it on your phone, the minute ends, everybody moves on to the things. So there's so many little hacks and tricks that you can incorporate and try and see, okay, is it working, is it not? But I would say that if you just hear and you say, oh, it's a good idea, but you don't really believe in it and you haven't experienced the power of it through personal practice, chances are it's not going to stick. Because with time, it's going to feel redundant, odd, it's not meaningful. There has to be a wellness ambassador that will continue. You are right now your team's ambassador because you integrated those practices into your life. And therefore, it's non-negotiable for you to practice something like that. So I would always say, like, don't try something because you heard it's a good idea. Make it internal. Is it true for you? Is it who you are, or is it who you want to become? And from that point, you practice what you want to become. And having group accountability or company organization accountability is one of the greatest catalyst of change. That's actually why I founded Sattva Me. It was my anchor. It was my accountability partner to continue to progress and evolve. And it works up until this day. So if you can make your team, your accountability partner to meditate or to do some kind of mindfulness practice, well, it's going to be huge consequences if you don't. Right.
Yeah.
So you can really use it as a personal self-development tool as much as help your team develop as well.
I love that. Do you have 2 more minutes or do you have to go right now?
Yeah, sure.
So I forgot to tell you, we started this thing about 2 years ago called the Greatness Question, and I forgot to give it to you in the beginning of the show, but I think you'll crush it. Can I do our Greatness Question with you?
Sure.
All right. So
is it the same question for everybody?
Yeah, it's the same question for everybody. So Oksana, what is the number one barrier to creating greatness that you've overcome in your life, and how did you overcome it?
Let me have a minute. The greatest barrier.
I'll repeat it one more time. The number one barrier to creating greatness that you've overcome in your life, and how did you overcome it?
It was myself. And I overcoming by stop being myself and being so committed and starting to become a person that I want to be and inspire. I realized that me as that person committed were a lot of beliefs and conditioning that I've learned that were given to me, but I really did not like, and there was internal conflict, and I couldn't pass the internal conflict until I started to not be me and started to change things that I know as me. Similar like you're saying, I hated meditation and hiking. Well, I had a PhD in partying. Like I was going partying and drinking 3-4 times a week. And I thought that was fun. And if anybody would tell me like, we don't go out, I would be like, you don't have a life. Now I haven't been drinking and partying for I don't know how many years. And I don't understand how I could like that. So that me in my 20s does not exist anymore. And it gave opportunity to be me, who is right now enjoying nature and silence and being with my family and kid. And it's a different me. I try to reinvent myself every single day. And that's a challenge.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's funny. I used to say, I'm just a naturally anxious person. I swear to God, I believed it. And then I was like, wow, I can't believe I believed it for like 40 years. And then I was
like saying I was born an alcoholic, right? Like I've never had in my milk, but I was born an alcoholic, right? Like what?
Yeah. And I let go of that belief and it changed my life 2 years ago. So it's not been like my anxiety reduced by like 99%. So it's amazing the stories we tell ourselves. So thank you so much. Look, hey, I know you got to go. So anyone that wants to work with you, we're going to put information in the show notes, but do you want to give like a quick, like, where do they go to learn more about the work you're doing if they want to connect with you or if they want to, get some of the programs you're working on with individuals?
The website that you shared in the beginning, actually, there are some programs that have descriptions. We customize everything, but it will give an outlay or some of the topics of the ideas that people can look into. So www.sattva.me, Sattva Me. And then you can share my social media as well as, I'm not sure what is exactly the audience, but you can share my email as well. I probably wouldn't want it in like the public domain, but if there is anybody who you personally know that would love to have a conversation, then I always start with let's meet on video and have a talk. 20 minutes, fast enough. And we can even brainstorm on simple things that they can already install without even working. Let's say if they have formal practice and they want to bring it to their team, we can talk about that.
Awesome. We'll go ahead and put that in the show notes. And we have a pretty big audience now. So there's like 40,000 people listening to this. So I'm not going to give them your email. But if you're my friend and you're listening to this, which lots of my friends listen to, feel free to reach out. Oksana, so much gratitude having you here on the show. Appreciate you. You changed my life, even though it was many years ago. It's stuck with me to this day. And thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
Well, I'm super happy to hear that you found transcendental meditation and done so much personal improvement and growth and continuing sharing and impacting so many people in life. So thank you for inviting me back. And I hope there will be third redo years after when we are wiser and in more growth, and we'll see how life evolves, right?
Awesome. Guys, do what you got to do. You got to share this with everyone. This is the jam here, and this is life-changing information. Until next time, peace out, everybody. We love you. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.